The mid to late 2000s accompany a strange time in gaming journalism. Print mediums like magazines were starting to be phased out by the new and wondrous internet, with websites like IGN or GameSpot taking the spotlight. Magazines lasting multiple decades would end production, rest in peace EGM, leading to legions of dedicated website crawlers embracing the easily accessible websites and taking their word as law. Before Twitch, YouTube, or any method of proper video sharing, you didn't really get to preview what a game looked like without playing it for yourself. That means if you were anything like me at the time, the word of the review was the only thing that mattered. Now, in the year 2019, we know better, what with multiple allegations and proof leaning towards paid reviews being a thing, but I can only imagine how many undeserving games got away with this. At some point, I realized that I just wasn't meshing with the scores on the screen. When you have these websites boasting a collective of game reviewers, if you don't pay attention, you might take a recommendation from someone that you don't mesh with at all. Or worse, you might be turned off of something potentially amazing. When I think of this, two video games come to mind. Dynasty Warriors Gundam 3, which is, that's just me, but one of the most infamous reviews on IGN, causing great amounts of controversy from those on forums on the internet, Clover Studio's God Hand. So yo, it's Austin, and today we're finally gonna be talking about the 3 out of 10 God Hand. This is the first time I took an interest in a video game only to see it get ripped to shreds by some dude. So we're gonna be talking about Clover, we're gonna talk about online reviews, we're gonna talk about God Hand, but most importantly, I wanna talk about how I think the internet is responsible for killing Clover Studio.
そんな時にはこれならどんどん倒せちゃう Enjoy zombie now Death Rising 2!
Yo, if you were into Capcom in the 2000s, you had so many games being tossed your way. It felt like every month or two you'd have a brand new Cappy thing to play, and that's without some of the Japanese-only games. How is this possible? Well, Capcom had a lot of production studios. Only a few currently, but at one point there were at least 8 of them. Each was affectionately named like Capcom Production Studio 1, Capcom Production Studio 2. Apparently there's a Studio 7, even though they've not made anything because 8 exists. Anyways, each subsection of Capcom has worked on various different things, but where does Clover Studio come into play? Well, after Group 4 released the critically acclaimed Beautiful Joe, a bunch of employees from various studios banded together to form what they were calling Studio 9. This included Atsushi Inaba, who at this point worked on Devil May Cry, a couple of Phoenix Wrights, and Resident Evil Code Veronica. He'd serve as producer for 2 big-name directors who would join him, survival horror legend Shinji Mikami and the king of the block button himself, Hideki Kamiya, also known as the voice actor for Godot. This supergroup of developers, initially known as Team Beautiful because Beautiful Joe, would become Clover Studio and be given the prime directive of creating new IPs for Capcom. What? Can you imagine this now in the year 2019? Deep in the 8th generation of video games, a AAA studio created for the sole purpose of making new IPs? Okay. Capcom was ambitious in this era, and mad respect for that. However, despite creating high-quality games, Clover Studio had, well, to put it bluntly, really crappy sales. Beautiful Joe 2, 85 on Metacritic, failed to enter the UK top 40 selling games chart. Okami, 93, considered one of the best PlayStation 2 games, also one of the best games ever. Named the least commercially successful winner of a Game of the Year award by the Guinness Book of World Records. HD ports also sell poorly for some reason. Good job, y'all. God Hand. See, here's where things get tricky. God Hand has a rather mixed reception. Yeah, it sold pretty poorly. I can't even find legitimate US numbers, but why is that? There's a lot of factors at play here. You have Clover Studio's inability to sell a game despite any kind of critical acclaim, probably due to a lack of coverage on the internet. You also have my unconditional trust in the game reviewers of the time. As history would tell, Clover Studio would not be around after this game, so why don't we take a couple moments to talk about one of my favorite games on the PlayStation 2 and one of the most underrated and difficult games of all time, God Hand.
You don't expect me to mop up, do you?
Come on, those guys are cake.
Not to mention, much sexier than you.
Well, your sexy little friends. They're coming for a dance.
They're still sexier than you are.
Yep. This is God Hand, a cheese fest, a 3D beat 'em up, a new style of action game designed by a lot of the people who brought you Devil May Cry, Resident Evil, and Beautiful Joe. Hideki Kamiya had his hands full with Okami, so Shinji Mikami was sitting in the director's chair. And boy, did they create something extremely unique. You play as Gene. Yeah, just Gene. Prior to the start of the game, Gene wanders into a random town where he meets a girl named Olivia being harassed by a couple of thugs. After rescuing her, he gets, So it turns out that Olivia is the sole survivor of a family that protects the God Hands, but it seems more like she's a back alley God Hand dealer. What is a God Hand? It's a big, strong arm. I don't know why it's not called the God Arm, considering Gene loses his entire arm, but hey, whatever. Look, I could get deep into this, but it doesn't actually matter. People want your powers, namely the 4 devas, who are a bunch of bad demons. Essentially, it's just heaven versus hell again, but this time, it hardly takes itself seriously.
This time we've got a special guest. Hitting the drums, Debussy!
Thank you! Represent!
The story and cutscenes, while fun, simple, and stupid, are merely supplemental to everything else. I mean, there is a conversation to be had on whether or not God Hand treads into le problématique territory, but after pondering it for a while, I don't think so. Yeah, it can be hella crass and offensive, but I feel like everything is taken to that 11 level, where it just goes full circle and no longer ends up treading into bad territory because everything is terrible. For everything dumb that Gene says, it's basically tossed back at him or he's punished because, well, he's kind of a stupid idiot.
Damn, I'm poor.
While some of the localization is a bit dated with certain words and characters, overall, I feel like it's held up. Also, poison chihuahuas, that's the best thing. But all of this is merely a sideshow and just background noise for what is really happening in God Hand. Yeah, I know a lot of people are going to see that as a negative or be like, well, I like a narrative in a game. But really, God Hand's narrative is all about, hey, let's be funny, let's be ridiculous and weird, and that's something that I like quite a bit. The tone it's trying to convey on a surface level might be a turnoff, but I think it'll make more sense when we dive into the big meat of everything, the gameplay. Anytime someone tries to use Dark Souls as the pinnacle of difficulty, I can't help but have a laugh. In any of the Soulsborne video games, challenges there for sure, but they are obstacles that can be overcome by simply embracing what's essentially an advanced game of... That's not to discount any of FromSoft's fantastic games, but I never finished a session of Dark Souls and felt like my hands were on fucking fire. God Hand, also known as arthritis, requires I don't know what to call this, finger dexterity? Sure, yeah, fingy dex that rivals your Tekkens and Melty Bloods. Souls is about careful timing and knowledge. God Hand is like, hey, are you tough enough? But what is it that makes God Hand difficult? There's a couple factors here, but for starters, the controls. At the time, I never played a game that controlled like God Hand, and to this day, nothing even similar. Imagine a 3D beat 'em up with a behind-the-shoulder camera, tank controls, right stick to dodge, directional-based combo inputs, and also you die real fast. Yeah, I bet that sounds awful. However, unlike a lot of video games of the time and today that place a lot of importance on accessibility, God Hand decided to go all in the other direction. Let's just make a control scheme that's like crazy and really confusing for newbies, and they did exactly that. So basically, all of your face buttons are different attacks. Square is your primary combo button, with triangle, cross, and circle being used for other singular actions. The cool part here is that every move you do is customizable. As you play through the game, you'll find money to buy techniques, as well as open chests that will contain moves that you can integrate into your main combo. You have 6 slots that you assign moves to that'll activate in sequence before looping an infinite amount. Because enemies can block and attack back, you'll have to use the right stick in order to dodge out of the way. You can dash sideways, do a backflip, or just dodge in their face. All of these dodges also act as a cancel for your current attack combo, so you can just restart your chain anytime you want.
It has a butthole. I can just cancel out the butthole.
Look, basically what I'm trying to say is that God Hand allows you to create the fighter that you want to use. Some moves like uppercuts have juggle properties, some have stagger or dodging properties. There are a ton of moves, some more viable than others, and in fact some are useless, but it's that customization that is just so alluring. You can also use the roulette wheel that has your super God Hand attacks. These vary in ridiculousness and violence. You have like Head Slicer, Dragon Kick, which will team rocket dudes into the stratosphere. You also got the Ball Buster, which is exactly what it sounds like and only works on males. The Swift Dick Kick. But actually though, I feel like ladies getting kicked there would also stagger, maybe. Lastly, and of course, you have the God Hand. Whenever your meter fills up, you can tap R2 to unleash the God Hand, which speeds you the heck up. You can use this for clutch moments or when you need to do a ton of damage real fast, or just whenever you're scared.
God Hand. God Hand.
I could literally talk about the combat systems all day, but I'm not qualified to do that because I am shit at this game. I sucked back then, and even now as an adult, I still kinda suck at it. But there's totally a reason for that. This is the part of the video where I would like to address the concept of difficulty in gaming. There's a bit of a descent towards games designed around challenge these days. They get declared as not player-friendly, short on substance, whatever insult you want to throw its way. But I think that's unfair. People play video games for all sorts of reasons. Some want a narrative, some want a half-naked anime chick, and some of us just want to break our fucking hands over and over until something works. That's God Hand in a nutshell. It's designed to kick your ass from level 1. If you're not able to jump over that first hurdle, it wants you to practice until you can. It barely tutorializes you as well, even though the first level has like a few tutorial cards laying around. If you're stuck here, this is when you'd log into Game Winners and be like, why is game hard? And people would write back, get good, leading you deep down the path of giving perfect scores to Gone Home. You see, that there? That was a joke. God Hand is really difficult, and that's not just because of the controls. There's another system that Clover implemented that's very similar to rubber banding and kart racers, and it doesn't really have a name, so I'm just gonna call it adaptive difficulty. Capcom had previously used a similar system to this in Resident Evil 4, which would, unbeknownst to the player, adjust enemy health values, ammo drops, and AI intensity. God Hand has a little meter on the bottom right of the screen that acts as a leveling system. The better you play, the longer you last without getting hit, the higher the meter goes. It goes from level 1, 2, 3, and then level die. Enemy AI changes, and they're more likely to try and gang up on you. They do more damage, they block and dodge more. It gets pretty hard. However, if you're a coward like myself, you can use the grovel function on the roulette wheel in order to drop your level down. Gene literally just gets on his knees and begs, which is hilarious. I've never played a game where I get actively punished for doing well, but I love that. It allows players to attempt to get through at the minimal skill level while also giving those near the ceiling an exhilarating challenge and playground to mess with combos. I'm not good or brave enough to get to level die. In fact, I barely hang around level 2. I got to 3 like a couple times and I panicked.
Level up? Fuck, that's not what I wanted.
I haven't even gotten into like the random chance of demons spawning who are way stronger than your normal enemies. Anytime those dudes pop up, you go panic mode. You have to adapt on the fly. Do I consume one of my super abilities? Do I activate my God Hand? Do I just die and restart the level at level 1 with full health? Clover Studio gave the players a ton of options on how to deal with every situation, and with a bit of practice, I think anyone can do it. God Hand wants you to get good at it. It wants you to practice, and that's something only a small minority of games do. You don't sign up for a BB tag tournament as your first time playing the game and then complain when you get eliminated first round.
That's not fair.
You go to the lab and you spend time practicing getting good. This can extend to plenty of classic retro games as well. God Hand is just an extension of the NES hard difficulties where trial and error were the name of the game. Contra and Battletoads are hard because they want to kick your ass. And so does God Hand. As with any other electronic consumer product, we've also got a plethora of boss fights. Some of these are harder than others, but overcoming these challenges for the very first time is so fucking satisfying. Sorry, I popped off a little bit. Well, that's God Hand. It's a bunch of nail-biting, knuckle-cracking challenges that rewards you with mostly the big serotonin, but as with any video game, it's not all roses. God Hand has a couple of flaws, and I'm not gonna skip out on them. Let's talk about it. For starters, the move list. You have access to 114 moves in total, and most of these are pretty freaking useless. Trying to put combos together in the training mode will lead to a lot of min-maxing in the speed and utility of what you can do. The faster you can punch, the more damage you do, so some of the slower attacks are just unused. The same thing applies to the roulette wheel. For the first half of the game, you might as well just dragon kick. There's also a couple of attacks that you can just exploit the ever-living shit out of this game with, like this one. Some of the aged elements include the Mad Midget 5, which, I mean, it's poking at Beautiful Joe and it's funny, but a little classless. Same with God Hand's take on the two gay characters, especially with Gene's take and text afterwards. It's definitely a sign of the times.
Like I give a shit.
I'm also not super into the game not healing the player between level checkpoints. I understand the point in trying to make something difficult, but sometimes you'll load into a level and be like, well, I'm just gonna kill myself. And of course, the fact that the game isn't casual friendly is also a knock on it. For those who are interested but just not skilled enough, they don't even have a method of being able to play through it all. I love the difficulty, but most people probably won't get past level 1. However, these are things that I look past due to the sheer quality of everything else. God Hand looks visually fantastic for the time. Little details such as the use of the roulette wheel slowing down time yet keeping Gene's duster flowing fluidly have such a cool stylistic look. Not many games make me feel like a badass, except Beat Saber, but this game accomplishes that very well. 10 out of 10, best game, okay, cool, we did it, goodbye, that's God Hand. So what went wrong? As we all know, Clover Studio is no longer around, and God Hand would be the last game that we would create. So now that you know how I feel, why don't we rewind back in time just a little bit, all the way to launch day. On September 14th, 2006, and October 10th in the States, God Hand would be released to minimal fanfare. The Xbox 360 had already been around for nearly a year, and the Wii and the PlayStation 3 were all aboard the hype train for launch. World of Warcraft was doing numbers, Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion was kind of destroying the entire gaming scene, and shortly after this, Gears of War would consume mainstream console gamers with its violent third-person multiplayer action. If you can't tell, it's pretty late into the PlayStation 2's lifespan, with exclusive games becoming more and more sparse. The PlayStation 2 was about to become a downgraded port and licensed game factory, as unfortunately all consoles are destined to be. While classics like Final Fantasy XII, the Personas, and Odin Sphere would come out, Sony's main focus was on the $599 US machine, stacked with amazing exclusives like Genji. Yo, Toy Story 3 came out on the PS2, what the If you don't think the odds aren't already stacked against God Hand, let me show you a couple of releases that came out in the same month. Tales of the Abyss, The Legend of Spyro, and Raidou Kuzunoha were released on the same day. Rockstar's Bully would touch down the following week, with Phantasy Star Universe and Splinter Cell Double Agent making waves the one after. Also, Final Fantasy XII. And let us not forget this important fact. Y'all remember Okami? Despite releasing a year earlier in Japan, Okami hit US store shelves a mere 2 weeks prior. Yeah, the odds are not just stacked here, but like towering over God Hand, like a big thick boy. It would need as much word of mouth and internet review support to be successful at this point, but crazier things have happened, right? But then, the nail in the coffin came. The 3 out of 10 score, the IGN meme, the better than God Hand joke that I've used for years. The reason I didn't buy God Hand when it was released. A lot of magazines and websites reviewed it as well, but IGN was the most prominent publication for gaming coverage at this point. YouTube was in its infancy and hardly grounds for analytical counter-opinions. The forums on IGN at the time were filled with people thanking the reviewer for saving them money. He even doubled down. The only places I even remember seeing positive views on this game were like back alley Google Chrome not secured forums. If you consider the scathing reviews, the impending launch of the 7th generation of consoles, and a flood of prominent games, including Okami, surrounding its release, God Hand never stood a chance. So as the story goes, Capcom would dissolve Clover a mere month after God Hand would release in Japan, and only 3 days after it released in America, and like 10 after Okami. Based on that, it seems like Capcom was just waiting to see how they would do in the States before making a decision. And that's weird. I think it's easy to place the blame on the internet here. Having put all of their assets into 2 huge new IPs only to have them both bomb in the same year must have been devastating on the studio. Listen, I'm not saying that IGN killed Clover Studio, but I mean...
Keep on rolling, 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 rolling.
Thankfully, this story has a happy ending, because from out of the ashes of Clover Studio, Platinum Games came into existence. Founded by all the same leads at Clover, Platinum Games is a massive force in the gaming industry today, one uninterested in being an assembly line, utilizing the mission statement of becoming one of the top 3 game studios in the world. I'd like to think that the quality of their work with games like Bayonetta, The Wonderful 101, and Nier Automata is all you need to realize that they might be pulling off their vision. God Hand is important to me in multiple ways, and I also think it's important to the gaming industry. Reviews like this and The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess's 8.8 put a lot of confusion in people's mind. Some people claimed it as fanboyism, but a year later, the Kanan Lynch Deadman fiasco happened with Jeff Gerstmann on GameSpot, and well, I mean, that didn't go so well, but it ended with him and the late Ryan Davis starting up their own gaming website, Giant Bomb, in retort. Since its release and the review, the cult hit status of God Hand has only gained more traction. Videos of people doing ridiculous combos hit the web, showing that it was possible to take it to another level. Popular content creators have expressed their love for it. I mean, hell, IGN literally put it on their top 100 PS2 games of all time, like a big whoopsie, we messed up, sorry. I would be dumb not to mention the credits theme, which has become a meme in its own right. I can't believe I didn't mention that earlier.
Don't act like you don't like the Bulbasaur. My arm, my arm, my arm, my arm, my arm, my arm, the summon of the powers of the God Hand.
To me, God Hand is one of the leading reasons that I decided to make a YouTube channel. I wanted to talk about things that no one really heard of, especially in this AAA dominated field where only select indies and like smaller budget games really get noticed. And on that note, I think I've done an okay job. So now you know, whenever I say better than God Hand, it's not out of a malicious mean, it's out of love. It's poking something that I truly enjoy as a celebration of the life of Clover Studio, as a celebration of the whole career of Platinum Games, who truly have become one of the world's top 3 developers. Except for the turtle thing. That was no good. Also, hey, if you want this shirt, you can buy it over at thepixelempire.com. Check out my shirt collection and you can save 10% with the code Eruption. I'll put a link in the description. Okay, bye. Yo, thank you very much for watching. Special Patreon shout out to Ronnie Vile, Legend Gary, Nitron, Flaming Fighter, J. Roos, Alfredo Ariano, Shintaro, Superfly1787, iRational, Christopher Olivia, Donald Dowdy, Chase Scott, Plasma Phoenix, Jackets, Jacoby Fitzpatrick, and Calvin Wong. Thank you so much for your contribution. God Hand's here, we did it. I'm very happy about it. I'm very tired. I worked all night, but it's good. I love you. More videos next week. We're keeping it up, man. Talk to you later. Final Fantasy 13 on Twitch. Bye-bye.